Hello everybody and welcome to another deck profile. This time around I'm showing you my Tachikaze premium deck post the premium ban list. So the time frame for this deck profile is sort of after the ban list but before clan collection / selection, as the deck will change when we get some of those cards. So this is where I want you to this is where this is the time frame where that deck profile takes place, right? So there are basically two builds for Tachi. There is Anger Blader, which is, I think, already pretty optimized. And then there's Neberos, which, a lot of people like different techs in their deck. But I think Neberos is a lot more fun to build and to play. So use my deck as sort of a template to build off of your own decks, but my build is always changing, and pretty soon I'll bring out the most updated version of the deck. So, let's not waste any more time. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shows me that you like what I'm doing. And let's get started with the Grade 0. Or the starter of the deck, because we do play another Grade 0, spoilers. And that is Minimum Carno. So Minimum Carno, pretty standard for the V. Starters, draws you a card, and gets you a quick shield if you go second. This is just better, I think, than some of the Forerunners, because the Forerunners come out of your soul, so you kind of lose a soul for a little bit, which we don't like for a card that I'll talk about in the future. But Minimum Carno or Dragon Egg, drawing you that card is just super good because it's another piece that you can add to your hand. For grade 3s, we play 3 copies of Gagano Blazer. I think Gagano Blazer is the best one right now to run, just because when you go first, obviously you can't stride, so Gagano Blazer offers the deck a lot of setup, as well as populating your field and giving power for not that many resources. A Counter Blast and a Soul Blast is pretty doable in this deck, assuming that you don't get damage denied. So his other effect is that if you've gauged 3 units, you get plus 5,000 power. So not only do you get to, for his first effect, draw 2, call 2 from hand, engage them, but you also get to give your field a 5k buff, which is good, including himself. So he's technically a 17k Vanguard, which is quite nice. And he also generates you an Axel gift, which I'll talk about later into the video. For grade 3s, we play, for other grade 3s, we play 1 copy of Heavy Arzine. You need to be at GB1 and it costs a Counterblast, but when he's retired by a Vanguard with the Engorge ability, that's a recurring theme that you'll see in the deck. Some of our cards do have that effect. You look at the top 4 cards of your deck and you call 2 grade 2s. So he kind of helps you generate more units to attack with. But because we have ways to sort of fetch him from the drop area, we don't need to see too many copies of him. And also he's a GB1 effect, so sometimes he's just stuck in your hand and he doesn't really do anything. And if you don't have, for example, your Gagano Blazer, sometimes you're forced to ride this, which is not great. So that's why I don't play that many copies of him, just because I'm not really trying to ride it. For grade 2s, Megarex. Megarex is really, really good, and it's one of the better cards in the deck to help us generate more attackers. So Megarex, when he attacks the Vanguard, can I spread these cards out like a normal person? Thank you. When he attacks the Vanguard, you retire a unit, draw a card. So that can proc a bunch of your other effects, but drawing you that card is also very good. And then if you do have the spare Counterblast, you can give him power up to the number of equip gauges that he has. That effect tends to be more used in the Anger Blader builds, so we usually like to leave our Counterblast for more multi-attackers. But sometimes getting the power is pretty good, especially if the opponent gets a defensive trigger, for example. The reason why we like to save our Counterblast is for cards like Spino Extor. So Spino Extor's effect is basically Megarex, but he calls the unit that he retired, and also gives it an equip gauge for Counterblast. So you still draw your card, you still get to do all of your Tachikaze multi-attack shenanigans, but he generates you a guaranteed attacker, which is quite good, or a booster. And one of the best cards to combo with Spino Extor is Regiodon. So Regiodon, when he attacks, you can gauge a unit, which is pretty good, and when he's retired, you can call the equip gauge and equip gauge it. So, for example, this is a combo that's quite common in the deck, is these two guys. If this has 2 equip gauges, so you can equip gauge it through something else and then use his own effect to equip gauge it, you can retire with Spino Extor and then call the equip gauge off the Regiodon effect, and then give it an equip gauge, and then call another equip gauge off the Spino Extor effect and give it an equip gauge. So you can either generate a new column or 2 new front row rear guards, which is quite good. Finally, for other grade 2 attackers, we have Diablo Cannon. Diablo Cannon's effect, at GB1, you discard a card from your hand, and when he's retired by a Vanguard effect with Engorge, you call him from the drop, and he gains 5k. So this is quite good because generating power for pretty much free, a card in your hand doesn't really matter because this deck draws a ton, is quite good. Especially when this is on an Axle Circle, so it's hitting for pretty decent numbers. For grade 1s, the best grade 1 in the deck, and really like the, honestly, the overall MVP is Savage Shooter. So when it's placed on the Vanguard Circle, you Soul Blast one draw card and then call that card and engage it. That can be pretty much anything. Like if you can get, say for example, like a Mega Rex off your Savage Shooter and you have a grade 1, say for example, Blue Sprint, that is like the absolute nuts, and you can go for that early aggression on your opponent. So this is why I like the V-Starter a lot, is just because I want to have that soul to then Soul Blast it for the Savage Shooter effect. But the other effect is just so good. In the Rearguard Circle, you can rest it to equip gauge something from your drop to a unit. So basically your entire drop area is, or your discard pile, or whatever you want to call it, your graveyard is just a toolbox for your deck to just use and multi-attack with. So you can always sort of like chain combos together, and you always have to be thinking like on your feet to make the best use of Savage Shooter. I'm using a lot of filler words, but basically card good. For other grade 1s, we have 4 copies of Blue Sprint. The reason why I'm playing 4 Blue Sprint and not 4 Regidon is just because it's that exact play that I'm talking about on turn 1, where you can just like rush your opponent and just pressure them and either get cards out of their hand or put a ton of damage on them. Blue Sprint has the same effect as Regidon, but he's a grade 1, so sometimes you can also use him as a booster, and a lot of the times you can also just have him on an Axle Circle and swing with him and then retire him and, you know, do some shenanigans, basically. But pretty good card. Also, we don't have that many great grade 1s that we would want to ride, so this is like not a terrible option because this is one of the first cards that you'll try to Soul Blast later on to start your multi-attacks. However, what we do not mind riding is Prison Bird. Prison Bird is your grade 3 searcher. He also gains some power when you equip gauge something, but the reason why we are running some grade 3 searchers in the deck is just because we have a low number of grade 3s in our deck, and we're not trying to G-assist, so having more ways to find our grade 3s is always pretty welcome. I wish that I could run like more useful effects, but honestly, just having that additional consistency in the deck is really all the deck needs to patch some of its weaknesses. So, 2 copies of that, and then for some countercharging, we have Raven Terra. This card is freaking amazing. This card is just so good. So much so that I actually want to play a 3rd copy of it just because it's that good. When it's retired by Vanguard with the Engorge ability, you know, blah blah blah, you need to be at GB1 and you Soul Blast 1, and then you can call it again from the drop, and then if you have 1 or less face-up cards in your damage zone, you can countercharge 1. So not only is it an extender for your deck, so you can like put this on an Axle Circle, and then, you know, you can retire it and it comes back, but you can also use it as a booster, or you can attack with it and then turn it into a booster later on. The card is just so versatile, and giving you that counter charge is just very useful. For the final grade 1 in the deck, we have 1 copy of Lacerit Rex. I wasn't sure what to put here. Maybe another Raven Terror could work, but I wanted another card that just gave me like a little bit of plussing early on, and I think Lacerit Rex is kind of perfect for that. When he splits from your hand, you can equip gauge it, and when it's retired, on the Rearguard Circle, you Soul Blast 1 and you add the equip gauge to your hand. So, say for example, if you if you equip gauge a PG, well, you can get your PG back for the cost of a Soul Blast. That's something that sometimes happens, and it's nice that I can use it as a way to sort of add cards to my hand whenever I need to. Now, for grade 0s, we have 3 copies of Little Tyranno. Some people like to run this as their starter, but because, like I talked about, Savage Shooter is so good that I would rather have only 3 copies of this in the main deck than, like, the starter as well. So Little Tyranno at GB1, you Cannon Blast 1, put this into the soul, so you're exchanging a Cannon Blast for a soul charge, and you look at the top 4 cards of your deck when it's retired by a Vanguard with the Engorge ability, and you call 2 cards with different names. That's pretty much it, and it's not once per turn. So as long as you have Counterblast, you can just like fire off Little Tyrannos over and over again. And this is why the deck can sometimes run out of cards in the deck, and you can deck out because things like Little Tyranno and Heavy Arzine. But so the cards are so good that you still run them anyway. But you do have to be at GB1. Anyway, For Overtrigger, I'm running Alberia, however you choose to pronounce it. This is the Overtrigger of choice. The reason why I'm running this over something like Dragveda is because, yes, Dragveda can stun your Vanguard, especially if you're striding. That's pretty powerful, but it's also sort of like a coin flip where your Neborus already restands, and if you drive check the Dragveda on the first swing, well, you already restood, so you lose all the value that that card provides. So where something like Alberia, you can make two things have 100 million, and that's basically like PGs or bust, right? So for that reason, I think Alberia is just more consistent and also a lot more threatening. Yes, some of those cards sometimes like go away, and Alberia is much better in, say, for example, a deck where you're running stands, or a deck that's like more focused on, say, for example, Raptor, but the card is still very, very useful. For crits, we are running, obviously, 4 Stride crits. These are just like staples in Premium. You don't want to discard your grade 3s in your hand when you don't have to, especially like when you're going from grade 2 to grade 3. Or even if you go second and then you can stride, these are just perfect to, you know, mitigate the costs. And then for some Sentinels, we have 4 crits and we have 1 draw. So 3 crits, 1 draw. You don't want to run draws in this deck just because you're already like deck thinning so much from calling with things like Little Tyranno, as well as like all of the effects that draw you cards, as well as your Neborus restanding. That's like 6 drive checks. So your deck will become like really small really quickly, and draws will not help you in that regard in terms of like putting you in a deck out state, right? But there are some matchups where you need to have that PG, otherwise you die, and for that reason, I like the one Arc Bird. Did I say Prism Bird? I meant Arc Bird. There's a lot of birds. For some other triggers, we are running 3 fronts. I like the 3 fronts just as a way to, when we make a new field, we basically get to, if we draft check this, we get to give power to our entire front row, and now our attacks are even more threatening. That's pretty much it, especially on that second swing of the Neborus. That's usually when the fronts become like really, really good. And my camera went, okay, there we go. You guys can see it, but on my screen, you know, it goes back. Don't worry about it. Anyway, 3 fronts, good. For heals, we're running 4 V heals. Pretty simple. They are just pretty beefy, and a lot of times you'll turn them into G guards anyway. But when you don't turn them into G guards, 20k shield is good. Also, the deck doesn't really need that much countercharging and soul charging that you'd want to use the other heals anyway. But when Heal Guardians come out, then you'll probably replace those for Heal Guardians. Strides. 2 Neborus. I'm waiting on more Neboroses in the mail, but when I do get those, I'll play more Neborus. This card basically does everything for the deck. Its effect is, it has the Engorge, and then when it attacks and it becomes engorged, you can get rid of 5 units or equip gauges, retire 2 of your opponent's units, G-flip, and then he restands and doesn't lose any draft checks. So this is really like how you make new boards. You consume your entire board, and then you make a new board. Again, it just does everything. On top of removal, which is really, really insane. And then while it's face up in the G zone, you can Soul Blast 1 to gauge one of your units, and it becomes engorged. That is pretty useful on some units that want to be engorged. Like you would attack with them, and that means that you wouldn't have to engorge one of your units. So sometimes it helps with sequencing a little bit, but for right now, just having the ability to generate an equip gauge for free is pretty good. 2 copies of Raptor. This is really here for like turns where, like, say for example, you have like a Mega Rex, and that's pretty much it. And so like you can call the Mega Rex from your hand and then use Raptor to give it 3 equip gauges, and then you can swing with the Mega Rex and then restand it. I just dropped my G-Zone. Anyway, Raptor is like okay, but Neborus just does everything else. But because we have so much space, why not run some of those cards instead, right? Now, for some other strides, we have 2 Gaia Devastate. He's okay. He generates a crit and an extra drive and gains 10,000 power at the cost of some rear guards, but you'll rarely go into this just because Neborus does pretty much the same thing but better. That's again something you'll notice in about the G zone, is that like Neborus is just so good that these are really just like tech options. 2 Gaia Devastates. This is your GB3. It can get rid of a column, which is pretty good, and generate some more attacks, but I never really find myself going into this, only when I don't have enough setup for a Gaia. When I don't have enough setup for an Eberos, so we do have the Gaia Dynast as an option. Some funny, where did they go? Is it still here? Did I drop it? I'm so professional. Where is it? There we go. The 2 copies. The Ancient Dragon Stride. These cost me like 10 cents. They're bad, don't run them. But they're funny. Now, for actually important cards, we have for our G Guardians, we have 2 copies of Blockade Gangna. Blockade Gangna is pretty good. This is the G Guardian that sort of plays into our game plan, where you can rush your opponent early, and then if they try to swing into your rear guards to take them out, you have Blockade Gangna to sort of like tell your opponent, hey, if you do that, they'll come back to my hand, and then I'll just attack you again next turn. So that forces your opponent to swing into your face to give you that counterblast that you really want. And it's also a pretty decent shield, like 25 is pretty good. Yes, you do have to retire a rear guard, but you always have rear guards that you don't mind retiring, because you'll draw so much that like you probably just have the exact same copy of that rear guard in your hand anyway. And then for the beefiest G Guardian, we have Bullish Primer. He gains 5,000 shield for every open rear guard circle, and because you have Axel, way to generate Axel markers, that's an additional 5k shield, which is pretty good. This card I think will get a lot better when we get Spino Driver, but even then I don't know if you run Spino Driver over Gaia. That's a discussion for another day. In conclusion, Bullish Primer, good. And then finally, we have 1 Daima Phalanx. Do I go into this? Not really. Why is it here? It looks cool and it's a dinosaur. And we had space. Quick Shield. Everybody should have a Quick Shield. And now let's talk about Axel markers. So here we have Axel 1 and Axel 2. I have these because, you know, this is from the trial deck, and this one I just got once, and I think they look pretty cool. Anyway, which one do you go for? Personally, I go for Axel 1 most of the time. Axel 1 turns a lot of your smaller units into like decent threats, and you only when your hand is like really, really bad do you usually go for Axel 2. But generally speaking, the way that the deck is built, that shouldn't happen that often. So you don't always need to draw that extra card. So as a result, you can just kind of have like an additional attacker that has decent numbers, and it facilitates like your deck so much. Like the way that your deck is built, especially because we built around Neberos, having that additional circle means that it's an additional circle to put a unit on as well as a gauge on. So that's like 2 out of your 5 like tasks for your Neberos. Tasks Among Us? I don't know why I said tasks, but yeah, that's pretty much like why I go for Axel 1. Just an additional attacker that's actually like has decent numbers. But like I said, sometimes you do need that extra draw, so Axel 2 is still decent. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the deck profile. If you guys did enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll be back shortly with the updated version of the deck. So stay on the lookout for that.